Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Future Industries Australia networking event. This evening, we're going to explore the question of what are the new industry opportunities for regional Australia. We've got some very clever people helping us with this event tonight, facilitating this event. We've also got some clever people in the room participating, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what conversations can be generated this evening. Before we get started, a couple of things. First is, as we're hosting this event in Brisbane, I'd like to point out that we are proudly on the custodial land of the oldest living civilization in the world. So as it is contested space, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to pay my respects to both the Jagera people and the Turrbal people and their elders past, present and emerging. Now, secondly, some quick housekeeping. Tonight's event is, the structure is going to be, we're going to kick off with some facilitated networking. So we're going to start with some conversation just to get the mental juices flowing with our host and our facilitators. You'll then be put into various rooms with those facilitators to continue the conversation, finally being brought back to the stage. There's nothing you have to do in regards to navigation. We'll take care of that. At the end of the event, there will be the chance to network and connect with your fellow participants, and I'll go over that later on. Whatever you do, don't hit the back button. If you do, just log back in and hit the timeline. You should be fine. If you do pop out, just go back to the timeline and navigate your way back to the sessions. Look, other than that, normal Zoom rules apply. If you can keep your microphones muted when you're not talking, that'd be great. If you're not getting anyone's attention, pop the hand up, and please, as always, be respectful of everyone's point of view, even through robust discussion. But for now, I'll hand over to our host, Sue Trewin, to kick things off, and look forward to seeing you later.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks very much. Good evening, good afternoon to everybody. So I've got a platform called This Regional Life. And when Nick asked me to, let's have a discussion about future industries for regional Australia, I said, well, that's fantastic, but we might need to step back and have a bit of another discussion before that, because there's challenges around traditional industries in regional Australia. So there's challenges, as we know, around housing and infrastructure and medical support and education, higher education, et cetera, et cetera. So there's challenges getting people into doing traditional industries in regional and rural Australia. So there's more complexity around future industries in regional Australia. So I said, let's get some great people in who really know what they're talking about. And we have three people who now currently are going to be sort of discussing this in a scene setting for us first off. And I'm going to introduce them in a minute. But the first thing I'd like you to do is a couple of things before I actually introduce everybody. Besides getting my hair out of my eyes, there's a poll. So we'd like to have some idea about what's part of the sector that you're joining us from, so we know sort of who's in the room. So there should be a poll there where you can say whether you're from government or you're from small business or you're an entrepreneur who's in the future industries, or even if you're someone who's just simply looking to move to regional Australia. So if you can just click your poll so we can have some idea of where you're from, so who we're talking to, and I'm going to share that later. And I'm also going to ask you now to, in the chat space down the bottom, just give us a bit of an idea about where geographically you're from. So I want to know whether I'm talking to just city folk or I'm talking to people in regional Australia, or we've got a combination of both. So if you could do that, and both those things we're going to share a little bit later. So to introduce our three panelists. So first off, I've got, if you're in this space, you'll know these people really well. So Tracy Scott-Rimington, who's the Regional Development Coordinator of the RDA Brisbane and Chair of TCI Oceania Chapter. And she's an expert in cluster development, regional innovation and global competitiveness. We have Chad Renando, who's the managing director and founder of Startup Status. And Chad is mapping and measuring the impact of entrepreneurs across Australia. And we have Julia Spicer, who's the director and founder of Engage and Create Consulting, the Gundawindi Business Hub. and the House 4390. And so she's the founder of these two regional businesses, which are based in Goondiwindi in Queensland. And Julia's mission, I'm going to read this, is to contribute to vibrancy and viability of rural and regional Australia by helping businesses grow. So we have three people who are really very experienced in this space, but are coming at it from three different areas. So to start our conversation, I'm going to ask you all one question, but I'm going to direct the first question to Chad, but I'd like the three of you to respond. So my first question is, who actually is responsible for developing the entrepreneur capacity in a region? Chad.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Sue. And it really is a great question. I do very much look forward to hearing from what some of the others have to say about it. It is a complex challenge because, support for entrepreneurs, new business, and even technology-based businesses quite often can fall between the cracks. When I go to a region, I ask, so who's responsible for helping these new businesses? I hear a few different responses. Sometimes it's all of us, at which point it can be none of us because there's limited accountability. Sometimes they say it's local government. Local government, though, has a challenging time having the capability or capacity to actually service the needs of these new emerging businesses. Sometimes it's a local innovation hub, but they may not be fully resourced. What we are seeing is in regions is new forms emerging. We're seeing new economic development organizations, new innovation networks, like what we see with the Maranoa Innovation Network up near Roma, what's happening with the Goondiwindi Regional Innovation Network down in Goondiwindi. So we are seeing new forms emerge. It is a collective impact collaborative model, which is creating these new, what they call backbone structures in regions is what we are seeing.
So Tracy?
Yeah, look, I agree, Chad. Up until today, it's been very difficult to get real proper support in many of the regions. But these new innovation centres and hubs are popping up all over the place. But they too probably struggle through lack of resourcing. At the end of the day, I see it as the responsibility of the business community in the region to pull together to get things moving, a bit like, I suppose, what we used to have once upon a time. They were called progress associations, whatever. Now can take a new form. And then they will both need to mentor, nurture, be prepared to put in a heck of a lot of time, but also provide a bit of an advocacy role to provide, to get in some interest from the three levels of government across the country. But the regional leaders, and particularly the regional business leaders, I think usually will need to step up. And I think we see regions where this does happen, we see them go ahead and thrive. So it's a bit of a patchwork, if you like, across the country as to the regions that have that strong leadership as opposed to the ones that don't.
And Julia, your thoughts?
I guess I think we've been quite clear in our community around what we see as the role of traditional networks like a Chamber of Commerce, where our historic traditional business leaders live, and what's happening in our innovation network. And we've actually been really clear that they're quite different groups and are attracting different people. So I think there definitely needs to be leadership from the business leaders, but it's what does that leadership look like? Because we still do have quite traditional business communities where it's the older gents at a certain age with a certain size business that get a lot of the say and sway in some of our communities. And if we're looking at what the future is going to look like, we actually need some different voices around the table. And that's where I've seen with the work I've been doing with some of the innovation groups, that's where we're getting some different people around the table that wouldn't normally be there at a chamber or some of those more traditional groups that get the opportunity to have their say.
And Julia, how do you balance that? I'm in a regional area, and not that regional. I mean, I'm only an hour and a half from Brisbane, but I can see even the area that I'm in, the traditional ones and the traditional people who are there, and who the mates and the real estate agent that drinks with the publican and all those sort of things, and the progress associations, or we sometimes call them the non-progress associations. The challenges of the people, and they have a very important an important role to play, and it's actually the challenge of marrying it up with the new people who are coming in, So who need to have the lessons learned from those who've been there for a very long time, but also, balancing that up with a different way of thinking, particularly now with this whole issue around Sydney and Melbourne people, moving into, moving to these regional and rural areas who think a totally different way. How do we actually, marry these two sort of ecosystems together to make this actually work, particularly if we're talking about future industry?
Can I say something there, Sue? The traditional industries, we've still got to love them, because without them, we're in trouble, right? So they need to be part of it. And we've found in the past, and over many years of working in regional economic organisations, to ask them to come together, to share their visions for the future of their industries. And then from there, you'll find certain ones might step up and start talking about new innovation in their sector. In the economic development world, it's building diversity from what it is you're really good at, from your region's specialisation or specialisations, that will give you the greatest bang for the buck with your investment in new innovation and future industry. So if what you're good at is, traditional ag, well, what you might have a really good opportunity in is your ag tech and ag innovation. It's a logical sort of progression, right? But I really believe that you need to love the traditional industries and nurture the future industries and bring them together. And I don't see them as opposing at all. That if it's well curated, they can come together and talk about opportunities for the future. But more importantly, even talk about who they're competing with as a region. And I think this is the bit that gets missed in a lot of regional development here in this country. We're not looking outside our region to actually see who are our competitor regions, both nationally and internationally, in our particular given strengths, specializations. So by doing that and setting that scenario, you're then encouraging people to collaborate more, to do more together, to build on your specializations and diversify and move into the future industries. Does that
Chad,
make sense?
Yes. Chad, do you have a comment to that response? Oh, can't hear you.
Unmute yourself, Chad.
Yes.
Be the one. No, that's good. Just real briefly, most innovation entrepreneur stuff you see coming out in regional areas is from these established businesses. They're doing things in new ways. They're having huge challenges with attracting workforce. They need to do things more efficiently. They need to diversify what they're doing, solve problems not just for themselves but for the competitors. We're seeing this stuff all over the place. And so it's tapping into those markets, but then it's getting everyone around the community to support those new ideas. So getting the government to be a participant, but not fully relying on them. Get business absolutely to step up, but it's not entirely business's job to do economic development. Get the universities to support, but they're not the only ones creating a brand new hub just for the region. Really, it is everyone getting around the table to tap into what the traditional business needs. While at the same time creating pathways for new business opportunities to be more rapid and break down some of those barriers, Sue, that you mentioned. And from a specific place, I always refer to Gunn and Windy, so I'm definitely keen to hear Julia's thoughts on that.
No, sorry, you go, Sue.
No, I'm swatting away a fly.
Oh, okay, no worries. So I agree. Obviously, any of the industries that currently exist really are our foundational pieces, and it's only because they're going well that we can spin off to be able to create these other opportunities for areas. And I think that if we look at what's happening at an international level, I think agriculture and particularly some of our ecosystem service opportunities with my environmental science background, I just think that that's going to be an opportunity where internationally we've got such an opportunity to look at how internationally we can spin out our good agricultural practices and turn that into a way where internationally businesses want to be able to support us and finance that. I think finally farmers will be paid for the good jobs that they're doing, I think, but they'll be paid by overseas businesses, which is pretty exciting. I think, yeah, so I mean, I think what we've got is some really great opportunities to take out of COVID as a really short-term example. You know, the work that I get to do, and we get to see things happening, you know, in a manufacturing space. So the number of producers that are now looking at, well, how do they play more of a role along the value chain than they've ever had to before, and where's there an opportunity for that? Now, part of that's driven from a need to better engage other members of the family in some circumstances, or they want to be able to continue to provide employment for people across the community. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in different examples. And then you tie that to the agri-tourism and the regional tourism, you tie it to some of the education tourism that we're seeing. And I think, you know, our foundational industries in the regions are what will create this new world. And it's just tweaking it around the edges. And we welcome all of the newbies from anywhere.
Great. So if we're talking about new people, I say, it's a huge decision to pack up, you know, the family, potentially mainly, to come, because it's not only, you know, you've got to earn an income, you know, there's education, as we're talking about health future, there's probably employment for both parties. There could be the expense or the risk of actually investing. So I talk about that aha moment. They go, okay, I feel comfortable to do this, because this is what the RAI and the government's talking about, this move to the regions. But, you know, what creates that aha moment to go, okay, I'm going to be okay, this is going to work for me, I'm going to make this big move, you know. So my question is, what makes that aha, that sudden realization or that inspiration that I will pack up the family, or I will risk, or I will start an organization, or I will look for a job? You know, what does actually make that happen for the people that they're talking about to move to regional rural Australia, to invest, spend, you know, and develop the other part of the country? Who wants to answer?
Yeah, well,
who wants to go first?
Sure. I'd like to say something. As you mentioned, Sue, I'm a director of the TCI network, which is the Global Cluster Professional Network. And so we promote clusters for economic growth right around the world from regions. So they're place-based development tools, and it's about innovation clusters and ecosystems. The idea of a cluster, a very strong cluster, and we've got a number of very good examples around the country. One at the moment that I think I could use here is the FAN, the Food and Agribusiness Network on the Sunshine Coast. Now, some 340 odd members, I believe, and more joining up every day, and people even moving to the region to set up new businesses in value-add food, etc., because of the success of that cluster. So it's the innovation, it's the supportive innovation ecosystem there. But the fact of the matter is that investors, and if you're talking about mum and dad investors even, they love clusters. They love to go where the action is. They love to have the cohort. They love to know that they've got access to, you know, all the key ingredients that will make their business successful if you're looking at business investment, right? So putting lifestyle aside. So strong clusters are definitely one tool that will attract people to regions. And there's many examples of that around this country and around the world.
So I just put something in the chat. I guess my challenge is often around how we're defining some of these area kind of things. So Gundawindi's a region, Crob's not as well known as the Sunshine Coast region, or, you know, it's hard when we're competing against Toowoomba for people. So the conversations we hear, and I'm an example of somebody who moved to Gundawindi for a 3-month contract 15 years ago and never went home. But it's not dissimilar to how you might choose a suburb in a bigger centre, right? Where's good coffee? Is there a decent school? Am I going to be able to get the resources that I want? There's a decent shop, there's groceries, there's whatever. And can I afford to live there? And I guess the response is, you know, for most of us, is yes. And you can do it at a cheaper rate than you can in other areas. So I think the challenge is, as rural areas, what we haven't done well in the past is actually explain, you know, we often go, well, come and live here because it's cheap. Well, that's not necessarily the most appealing thing. Come and live here because, yes, you can afford to have a house. You can also still keep your 6-figure salary that you had in Brisbane or Melbourne or Sydney or wherever. You know, yes, you can do this. You can walk your kids to school. So I think it's actually that age-old issue of how do we actually promote living in the different areas, and the level and the quality and the variety of jobs that are out here at the moment. So you can come and get a job here, and it is more than, you know, whatever you think it might be, working on being a farmhand. You can definitely have that job if you want, but you can also be an engineer at, you know, at any of the multi-million-dollar businesses that we've got going on around the region.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to quickly go to the breakouts in a minute, but I'd like Chad to ask him one last question before we do that. Is what does that success look like then for an entrepreneur who to support the economies for transition? So what is it for an entrepreneur? What does that success look like?
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward for an entrepreneur, and a lot of things around innovation ecosystems is founder first. They want customers, they want market, they want scale, they want a successful business. You know, happy entrepreneurs, a happy ecosystem. I think the other question, though, Sue, and what Julia and Tracy were touching on is what does success look like for a successful ecosystem then that can foster and support entrepreneurs, and that's more complex. Which I think a lot of the practitioners here, and I'm seeing some clever people from economic development organizations across Australia in the chats, they're saying, well, how do we create the environment by which these entrepreneurs can thrive? And it is that livability. It's that, and so therefore you need to touch on a bit of tourism. But I think the other thing, and I think it's the biggest existential question a lot of regions have, is what are you known for? What are the things that we can double down on? We have scarce resources. We can't be all things to all people. The innovation ecosystem, when it emerged, 2010, 2015, all these innovation hubs popping up, it was, let's do startups, let's do entrepreneurs. We are starting to see a maturing. Regions across Australia are really focusing on one or two things. We're seeing the ag tech hubs, the bio hubs, the niche within a niche pop up. Definitely, we want to get some diversification within there, but also, you go to a region and that's what they're known for. So if I'm doing anything within cotton, if I'm doing anything within bio, any sort of waste to energy type stuff within a related field, I can hop down to Goondiwindi, I can hop over to Bundy, I can hop down to Limestone Coast for that one particular thing. And I can be an entrepreneur successful there. So I think it's that combination of making sure the entrepreneur has markets, but also making sure that the ecosystem has breadth as far as livability and lifestyle, but also depth as far as that specific thing they want to be known for.
Okay, well, it's a great segue, because what we're going to do is break out. I think we've got a dozen people, so it'll be 2 or 3 rooms. Angie, I'm not sure. You can tell me. And what we're just doing is we're actually allocating you to a room, because the conversation is the same in every room. It's just a deeper dive. And just for my speakers, my hosts for the sessions, it looks like we've got mainly small business people based in regional based organisations. We have some ecosystem builders and government, entrepreneurs and community. No one apparently is moving from the city, so and a mix of people from regional areas and the cities. So what I'm wanting everybody to do is kind of go into their sessions. You're going to go have a deeper dive, and I want the leaders of the session, which are 3 speakers, to come back with a great idea, a collaborative idea for growing that innovation for economic development to encourage future industries into regional Australia, and then pitch those ideas, and then we're going to open that up for a bit more Q&A so everyone can talk about those ideas further. So my understanding is you're all just going to be able to now go into the rooms. Let me just see if someone's telling me 2 rooms. Okay, so I think you've all got either room 1 or room 2, and maybe we have Chad and Julia, sorry, and Tracy, you can hop into one or the other. Great, so I think we're back. Fantastic. I hopped in and out of those the sessions, and it sounded like that's some great discussion happening there. We'll have the opportunity for some Q&A, but I just want each of you to come back with a great idea that came out of the session you were in, and so we can give that information to the other group. And then please, if there's questions from people, put it in your Q&A, and we'll open that up for some discussion for a few minutes. Chad?
Great. Yeah, and very keen to hear Tracy's thoughts as well, because Tracy was kind of sharing and having some views. Just very briefly, we had a bit of a theme where they were talking about vision sharing, celebrating both the startups and the long-term businesses, definitely sharing those insights and experience in a very practical way. For example, taking new businesses and the business community through through factories and through successful businesses so that people can learn from that. And also making those community connections. And Fiona shared a really good example of having a pitch event, but definitely getting the members of the chamber along and established businesses to make those connections and break down maybe some may perceive as silos or barriers to wanting to be seen to be do something. It wasn't brought up in our crew, but I know that the tall poppy concept and not wanting to put our head up and not wanting to be seen to do something different can be sometimes the sentiment shared in communities. And so a lot of the recommendations from the ecosystem builders and the leaders in our group were around that. Again, vision sharing, celebrating successes, sharing insights and experiences in practical ways, and making that community connection through things like pitch events and real practical programs.
Yeah, Chad, if I can add, yep, absolutely. The connecting is such an important thing, and just promoting what it is you're good and celebrating it. It's so important. And like I say, give the love where you should be giving the love, put people who have worked hard in their sectors, give them an opportunity to tell the world what it is they've been doing, where the opportunities are as they see it, etc. Build on your successes. And I just want to give a quick overview. Last week I was in Cairns for a regional leaders roundtable where we had, I think it was 24 people who were representing their particular industry sectors, be it tourism, food, maritime, aviation, new technologies, manufacturing, all sorts of things. And they all had a chance to share with each other for the first time in a very long time what it is they're getting up to in their sectors, and they have agreed to come together in a much bigger opportunity, inviting all their colleagues along later on in the year, where they're rallying around a vision to become the green economy capital of Australia. And how do they, from their sectors, adopt the new technologies, embrace the new, in fact, even develop and, the new technologies that they need to be competitive into the future.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Julia?
Yep, we had some great conversations as well. I guess we're in terms of an idea for growing economic development and linking it to any of the future industries that might be happening in our regions. We really came back to this piece again around connectivity and communication. So we had a great example from Caroline, who's based at Sunshine Coast, talking about the sea cable that has been, the infrastructure that's being implemented, I guess, from there. And how does that then mean that we've got an opportunity to have an industry around data centres, around being able to make sure that access to this connectivity and the cables is something that can happen for businesses not only in that region, but then what does that do from a broader area? So we had the example of the Sunshine Coast with the sea cable. In my part of the world and in many other parts of rural Australia at the moment, we have the inland rail development that's going on. So billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure. What's the connection between the railway line and connectivity? We have NBN rollout. How does that get rolled out with something else? Because we know that what happens, and often, unfortunately, we find out about it when there is a natural disaster, is that we actually have quite a lot of infrastructure that can be connected, and but we have so many silos of businesses and organisations. So you can't use the Optus tower if you're Telstra, and Telstra won't let Vodafone use theirs, but then something terrible happens and all of a sudden everybody can use everything. So how do we have a more collaborative and therefore more efficient way of actually using existing infrastructure, and where there's new infrastructure being built, how do we get this piece of connectivity and communication just embedded so that it's an automatic thing that we look at how we can expand that wherever we come to. And then once we've got that sorted, we know then we've got the ability to work remotely from home better, and there's opportunities to do that. We know then that any of the new work that we want to do has this foundation of access to good connectivity.
Brilliant. I can see that this is a part of a much bigger, longer discussion, and a lot of this information will be collating and sharing. And also, I want people to flag if they're interested in further discussing this in additional sort of platforms. So, but I think we have a couple of minutes left. Quick couple of minutes for a couple of questions that I've got here in the Q&A. One to Tracy: have you seen great examples of digital networks that have supported and enabled cluster or community growth? And that's from Theo, who has his own platform localized.
Well, yeah, working with one right now. In fact, I'm a member of what's called H2Q, the Hydrogen Cluster for Queensland. It's recently funded, and we're part of a network of 13 hydrogen clusters across the country, supported by NERA, the National Energy Resource Agency, IGC, federally. And yet, right at the moment, we're looking at digital platform to connect us all up and to map that hydrogen innovation ecosystem. It's essential, really, in today's world, I think, that you have the digital platforms, and there are just examples everywhere you look. Can give you more specific ones offline if you like. But no, yeah, they're sort of an essential part of the future. Yeah.
Great. So someone made a comment that innovators supporting the local footy club or the hockey club or whatever goes a long way to opening minds too. So there seems to be this sort of kind of connection. We have to be from both sides, from the old and the new, to bring them together. So there is also a question around clarifying some of what Diana has asked. We had a question before about clarifying what are some of the actual future industries. I'm not sure whether I can bring in Nick at this stage to actually talk about future industries, but okay, great. So Nick, can you sort of define some of what you see as future industries, and maybe we can just wrap that up with our three other people in relation to what really would be working, for regional rural Australia in relation to future industries.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sue. Look, and it's interesting to hear you guys talking about what we're trying to achieve with future industries, which is more connections, more learnings, more collaborations, and more celebration of innovative ideas across Australia to raise the awareness of what we're actually capable of. We've come up with future industries. We've come up with 12. It's not definitive. It's in stone, but we've picked those based on our research. We believe are the best ones, the best bets at the moment to pursue, and from the facilitators and from those participating, we're happy to take feedback on where this could go. At the moment, we're looking at things like biotech and pharmaceutical life sciences, cybersecurity, mining tech, ag and food packaging, clean tech, sustainability and wellness, ed tech, e-commerce, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, online entertainment and space tech. And then under those sit things like AI and robotics as well. But that's sort of the starting point. And then we're looking for the commonalities, issues that we can address that can raise them up as one.
So besides the obvious ag tech, can Julia, Chad, Tracy comment on those sort of industries that Nick's mentioned, for the possibilities for regional rural Australia? Is there anything that jumps out of you besides, Yeah,
absolutely. If you don't mind, I mean, Chad, you probably say I'm currently working too with the METS cluster here in Queensland. A fellow by the name of Andrew Scott. He's working on an opportunities corridor between Mount Isa, Townsville for the mineral province, and the theme is mines of the future, right? And the technologies that we will be able to develop and are developing and are already selling overseas for mines of the future, clean, green, sustainable mines. Across Queensland, we have, I believe, 1,200 decommissioned mine sites that have to be rehabilitated. We want to get onto that, get the technologies to clean these sites up and be able to develop up the companies doing that and support them in exporting these new technologies, right? So there's such a huge opportunity for the whole of regional Australia. And the thing is that those technologies need to be done and developed sort of more or less on site a lot of the time, such as the critical minerals processing. you know, the whole rare earths piece that's being discussed currently, relevant right across the country. And 1,200 of those mines here in Queensland, and I'm not sure what it is nationally, but it would be, you know, huge. Yeah. And it's all in the regions and remote often, right? Mostly. Yeah.
Julia, you're mentioning lots solar and wind farms, green waste.
Yeah, we've seen people looking at, you know, from a water use efficiency perspective. So obviously a fair chunk of us live in the Murray-Darling Basin. So at a federal level, you know, there's lots happening in that space that we're seeing. Work I do with the Great Barrier Reef and some of the producers up there looking at, you know, how they can be part of some of the changes. So I think this piece around ecosystem services and how are people, you know, looking after and finding support out of that. But I certainly see, you know, the manufacturing piece and is going to be really great. And I think, you know, COVID helped with that. I think the state and federal government, certainly Queensland government and federally, had plenty of investment that they were putting behind some of the manufacturing strategies. So Nick, I think the couple of priorities that you rattled off are bang on what we need to be able to do.
Okay. One last quick half a second with Chad, and I think then Nick has to wrap it up. And also we've got our opportunity for our networking.
Ditto. Yeah. So just second a lot of that. Look, it is, you know, and you can see the federal support from that, from the Future Drought Fund. Obviously, anything to do with water savings. You know, what's happening with the climate is a very real reality. Combined with the manufacturing fund that's going to be out there, anything waste to energy, waste to value, food governance, blockchain, and you start rolling the technologies into that. You know, how do we map the data of the land underneath, which then obviously goes with drones, blockchain as far as governance. We see some things obviously with food there, alternative food manufacturing, food governance. So, and we can rattle on, but, you know, Nick and crew who are doing a lot of exceptional work in raising awareness for this, and even that clustering work, as Tracy mentioned, getting people around the table to really focus on the complex challenges that no single organization can address. And so we need things like these forums and more to be able to focus the collective impact on the outcomes that we need to achieve.
Well, let's see where the feds are going to throw their money at tonight with tonight's budget. They talk about the regions, region are all Australia. So let us just see. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sue, for running this for us. Thank you also to Chad, Julia, and Tracy for sharing your time and your thoughts. And thank you to everyone that participated in this session. You know, you hear these conversations and that you just feel they could go on, and clearly they could. Clearly there's some good ideas. So if anyone's got any thoughts on that front, please feel free to share that. We want to generate change. We want to generate positive change. So we'll take all ideas on board. Now, from here, we have the opportunities to meet people directly. We've got a couple of things. One is our rapid networking session. Now, it only works if you participate, and it can be quite a bit of fun. It's basically you get thrown into a room with 3 other people, and it's a chance just to introduce yourself and have those conversations for the purpose of going on with those conversations. That'll go for about 10 minutes. And then after that, there is a meeting hub. Now, to access that, you simply go back to the timeline. You'll see the networking will happen in a moment. Wait for it, as they say. You'll go back to that, and you'll be put into groups. You'll be shared around, and that'll go for 10 minutes. And after that, as I say, if you want to connect with anyone, we'll leave the meeting hub open for half an hour. It's basically like a version of LinkedIn, just for sort of the opportunity to take these conversations offline. Thanks again, everyone, for participating, especially our facilitators. Look out for our next event on June the 3rd with Yasmin Griglidianis from World's Greatest Garage Sale and Ryan Swenson from Officeworks. The Power of Partnerships is a fantastic project they did. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thanks again.